In other words, everyone accused is guilty. If you deny that, you're guilty too. Weirdly, almost nobody in the media pushed back against Rose McGowan's demand. Before long, they may have to obey her. She has nearly 1 million Twitter followers. She's calling the shots. Let's just be honest about what's happening. Social media are driving this insanity. They're making mob justice the rule and clear thinking impossible. Large portions of our population, and ironically, they tend to be the best educated portions of the population, are now addicted to outrage, virtue signaling, bandwagoning. Social media did that. It turns out it's not that helpful to know what every famous person in America is thinking at all times. It just makes us all crazy and less content. A few weeks ago, former Facebook president Sean Parker admitted that the website he helped found, Facebook, quote, literally changes your relationship with society and with each other. Parker was right. It is all shredding our social fabric before our eyes. Remember, you have an absolute right to say what you think is true. Other people might not agree with you, but that's okay. It doesn't make either of you evil or mean you ought to be fired from your job. It just means you disagree. That has always been true. It was true before smartphones, and no matter what they say on Twitter, it's true now. Joining us now, radio show host Tammy Bruce. So, Tammy, I never thought that I would defend Matt Damon, and I'm not actually really defending Matt Damon. I'm just defending the proposition that you can say something that other people disagree with without being fired for it. And we seem to have lost that.
Yeah, indeed. Look, I also loathe him. He's said some things about the president and about others, which politically I very much disagree with. I don't know him. But he seems to me to be like the blind squirrel here. Every now and then you find a nut. And he's found one because he's right. And you're absolutely right in your assessment leading into this. But as a feminist, here's also what I see in this regard. And I've been arguing from the beginning here that we need to be careful as I saw the attempt to conflate guys being jerks with guys who are actual predators. Yeah. And the women involved in this and the people on the left argue that, well, we don't want him and others to trivialize these serious allegations. But you know what really trivializes them, Tucker, is when you do compare a man, let's say, calling you beautiful as you walk down the hallway, or maybe rubbing your back with an act of rape. That trivializes those survivors, what they've been through. And I think that as most people understand that, as we listened to, as you read what Matt Damon said, and this is now our challenge, because this is what the left always does. They use a serious issue that people, we know it has to be dealt with, and then write it, and then abuse it. They go too far. It's like the French Revolution. The people begin to do things simply because they can, and they use it for revenge or because they can't stop their rage, and then everybody's going to have to pay. Jodie Foster, I think, said, I saw a headline the other day, that every man over the age of 30 is somewhat culpable for the sexual harassment we now face. I have found in my life it's been men who have been most helpful and the most decent to me, with women not necessarily being so. So this is an issue of behavior. It's not an issue about men or sex, even, as we know. It's about control. And I think that unless we get a handle on this and have an honest conversation, you're going to have the left once again shredding an important issue like sexual harassment and sexual assault because they don't know, they have no boundary of what's important, and then conflating everything and then just simply vomiting their rage out on everyone.
Exactly. And it diminishes the experience of people who really have suffered. I mean, if you lost your legs in an IED and I closed my hand in a car door, and I say to you, we both kind of suffered in the same way, you would say, no, actually, I have my legs blown off. You broke a finger. They're not the same. Yeah.
And look, there are different things in the workplace and the seriousness. Workplaces clearly are dealing with that. But we do have to be careful with single voices who have perhaps originally some very important things to say. Right. And then something changes in that framework because they should not be conflated. These things are different. There is a continuum, and certain voices, hopefully voices like ours, will remind people of these things and make sure that we don't have a wholesale, effectively a beheading of everyone who the left doesn't like or that feminists don't like, because then we're all going to lose.
That's exactly right. Let reasonable people speak. Tammy, you are a reasonable person. Thank you,
sir,
for doing that.
Appreciate it.
Dr. Carol Lieberman is a psychiatrist and a frequent expert witness in sexual harassment cases, and she joins us tonight. Doctor, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
So things are moving really quickly in our attitudes collectively about sexual harassment, sexual assault. What's the downside to this potentially?
Everything is really out of control. This has become such a bandwagon. Now, certainly there are a lot of women who have been sexually harassed,
yes,
have been sexually abused. You know, a lot of these things are valid. But I think the problem is that there are some women who have joined this bandwagon who have not been sexually harassed or abused, but who are angry at men for their own personal reasons and have extended this way beyond what the original concept was. I mean, we're now going into the American values of free speech and presumed innocent. You can't have that anymore. People are being tried in the media because of these allegations. I mean, now you're not even supposed to say allegation. I mean, that is absurd. And I mean, so Matt Damon, you know, here he's because he was connected in some way to Harvey Weinstein, because he didn't speak out against him. Now people are going after him because he's a friend or a coworker. I mean, where does this end? It's like 1984, and it's eroding our trust. Men and women, you know, for women to have power, it's not to be like men or to make men feminized, you know, to make them, to take away their power, to castrate them. I mean, that's essentially what's happening. It's better to be able to work together in an environment, share both of the things that each one has that can add to the other. It's not about, I mean, yes, certainly women deserve, there's been pay discrepancies and all these kinds of things. These are true. But to go about it in this mass hysteria kind of way and to take away things that we really need to rely on, as I said, like presumed innocent and free speech, it's just going way beyond what this calls for.
But I also suspect, in ways I can't completely articulate, that some of the victims in this are going to be women down the line.
Yes. You know, this is not... People are not looking, women are not looking at this for the long term. There is going to be effects, you know, women are going to be hired less because men are going to be afraid that they're going to accuse them of sexual harassment. Really, what is even more powerful is if we're not allowed to hug or flirt, or, I mean, the relationship, the love relationship, and I'm not saying that a harasser and a victim, you know, that's a love relationship, but, you know, love has actually been under fire now for a while. I mean, there's no dating anymore. People are going to websites, internet, and so on. No flirting. I mean, we're really losing a lot of what is good, or was good, between the relationship in the...
And we're not pausing to think of the consequences, unfortunately. Dr. Lieberman, thank you. I appreciate your insight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lawmakers demanding answers tonight about why the Obama administration appeared to protect the terror group Hezbollah. In a bid for a nuclear deal with Iran, the Obama administration reportedly allowed the terror group Hezbollah to smuggle massive amounts, tons of cocaine, into the United States. It was a stunning decision. Some congressional Republicans are demanding answers. Yesterday, 2 of them sent a letter to the Department of Justice demanding all documents they might have about this question. Many Democrats, meanwhile, argue this is both old news and a distraction, and, by the way, untrue. Richard Goodstein advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns. He joins us tonight. Richard, thanks for coming on.
Sure. Happy to be here.
So here you have a piece written in Politico. It's a liberal publication, author probably liberal, quoting a number of people, interviewing dozens of Obama administration employees at Treasury and DEA, who said, in some cases on the record to testimony before Congress, that the Obama people slowed down the investigation and get the Iran deal. Why would they all lie about that?
Well, a couple things. This is a predicate. This smells like Benghazi, which is to say it's much ado, indeed, a lot to do about nothing ultimately. The answer to your question is that the people who were named sources, see, why would they do it? Because they had a bias, which is to say they never liked the Iran deal from word go. And the people who later were asked to comment about the story, from John Brennan on down, they said there was nothing to this.
John Brennan?
Well, I'm just saying.
You mean the guy who's always jumping around on Twitter?
I'm saying the guy
John
who's
Brennan is not a credible. Okay, John Brennan is a ludicrous figure. So and you'll read his Twitter feed if you don't believe me. But I want to get back to the motive here. So The author, again, for Politico, liberal publication, supported the Obama administration all 8 years pretty consistently, interviewed Obama employees who said not that they didn't like the Iran deal. Maybe they didn't like it. There are reasons not to like it. But very specifically, the Obama people tried to squelch Operation Cassandra, an investigation, an operation designed to stop Hezbollah drug dealing in the Americas. Why would they lie about that?
Well, I don't know that they did lie, because if you look at the story, everything's kind of qualified, right? They talk about what might have happened, what could have happened. They talk about the fact that, well, the Czech Republic could have been pressured to do more to release somebody. I mean, it's one qualifier after another, and I think that speaks to the fact that those people who spoke, again, not for attribution, didn't really know. And the people who did know weren't interviewed for the record.
Well, it's the people who ran the program were quoted, who ran the DEA program, who said, look, we had them, and because the Obama people wanted to get this Iran deal, they made us pull back, and tons of cocaine wound up in circulation in the United States. It just doesn't, I mean, it'd be one thing if it was, oh, you know, the Koch brothers are alleging something, or some longtime enemy of the Obama people, but these are Obama's own employees, dozens of them. It's just hard to see their motive for lying about this.
Obama's, I mean, these were people who worked in the federal government when Barack Obama was president.
In the agencies, their boss was Barack Obama. His picture hung in their office.
You got thousands of federal employees now.
Correct.
Are they Trump's people when they're not going along with the program?
Well, it's like 80% of federal employees vote Democrat. So I don't think they were, you know, probably not a lot of right-wingers, right?
My point is, they had an agenda. They didn't like the Iran deal. And I think that they're now kind of trying to get their rocks off by trying to kind of talk to this reporter to talk it down. Let me say two other things.
So they're lying.
Well,
all these people are lying about the same thing, is what you're saying. Why not just criticize the Iran deal? Wouldn't that be easier?
Well, they should be doing that if that's what they thought. There was been no war with Hezbollah, just parenthetically, since 2006.
Right.
And the Iranians do not have a nuclear weapon. Again, I don't think there's a connection. I believe these very senior people from the Obama administration who have, since the publication of this Politico story, said there's nothing to it in the most vehement terms that they can.
Well, because it's horrifying and it reflects so poorly on them. But it doesn't answer the question in the specifics. So the piece says specifically, Hezbollah's main arms dealer was nabbed by an Eastern European government. The United States could have extradited him, but chose not to because it didn't want to queer the deal.
It actually doesn't say that. What it says is that they didn't put sufficient pressure on. And in fact, as a factual matter, the U.S. condemned the Czech Republic for not releasing this guy.
But we didn't get him. I mean, we condemn all kinds of things all the time. And look, this is just the allegation, and the guy is back in Beirut selling arms.
Right. So somehow to attribute that to Barack Obama because the Czech Republic held a guy that they wouldn't release to the United States, and that ultimately they did release into his own, somehow or other, that, again, that's Benghazi stuff.
Does it?
It's
well,
Benghazi
I don't know.
stuff.
I mean, look, I don't want to address Benghazi because it's an entirely different story and a different fact set. But this piece alleges that tons of cocaine made it into this country, and the Obama administration knew, the DEA knew it was coming into the country. I mean, that doesn't seem to be much debate about that.
Well,
that seems like a big deal to me, given the toll that drugs have taken on the country in the last 10 years.
Right. I mean, nuclear weapons would take a much bigger toll on the world. Okay. Again, I don't subscribe to the notion.
Okay, so it is a trade-off. You're saying that's
I don't subscribe.
More people
to
die
the
of
premise.
drugs here, but we got the.
I don't subscribe. No, and there would be people that dying who are United States citizens. I don't subscribe to the premise of the article, but the fact of the matter is, I think if it were true, it still was a deal that was worth buying.
You just proved the premise of the article. But thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Well, despite a 50,000-word piece in Politico kind of nailing the Hezbollah story, a story with major implications, no one's really paid attention in the press. Was it reprinted on the front page of the New York Times? No. Are they talking about it on other morning shows? No. Why is that? Joe Concha pays close attention to the media. He writes about it for The Hill. He joins us tonight. Joe, this seems like, far be it for me to tout anything Politico does. I'm not a fan. But this piece seemed like something that was hard to ignore, and yet it's being ignored. Why is that?
Well, usually in these cases, it's looked as, when a story isn't reported, oh, it comes from a right-wing outlet, and therefore we're going to dismiss it. As you said, Politico is not exactly a sentiment of, or a bastion of conservative sentiment. So that's out. Then we look at this as being a 14,000-word piece that this reporter, Josh Meyer, worked on for months. And Obama administration officials, the ones pushing back on this now, loyalists, all were asked to comment on the story, and they wouldn't before the publication. They pushed back on it afterwards. They can't cite specific facts that are wrong with it, just the overall thrust. So certainly that's one thing. And look, if we played a game of PU, okay, parallel universe, an appropriate acronym, and you took out President Obama and Hezbollah, and you inserted President Trump and Russia, how much coverage do you think this would get? I'm guessing you would need 30 hours in your broadcast day just to cover this. But instead, ABC, CBS, NBC, the nightly newscast, and that's the best gauge to use in these situations in terms of coverage, all did not cover this story. It demands to be covered more, digged into more, since both sides are disputing it. But there's certainly a lot here based on how meticulous this reporter was, which, by the way, he had, as you noted before, not the unnamed sources that could be political operatives with an agenda, and it could be hearsay. He had named sources on the record, documents on the record, things we did not see, say, with the Brian Ross report when he said that President Trump had ordered Michael Flynn to talk to the Russians during the campaign, when in fact that happened during the transition. That was based on one flimsy source, no checks and balances, and rushed to the air.
Do you think part of it has to do with the fact this was also a drug story? And the people dying of drug ODs and drug addiction in this country, more than 60,000 of them last year, are mostly in the middle of the country. That's not happening in the neighborhoods that media people live in. That story is, I mean, it's actually lowered life expectancy for Middle America. How often is that even covered?
Middle America,
in the press?
New Hampshire, New Jersey, where I live, the opioid crisis, the drug crisis that's happened in this country is vastly underreported as well, because, again, it ain't sexy. It's not sexy, just like the economy isn't sexy, just like the ISIS caliphate being destroyed isn't sexy, just like all of these things, tax reform isn't sexy. Instead, we concentrate on Russia. There are 3 investigations going on. I'm not saying don't cover it. I'm not saying there isn't a story there, but we are overwhelmed in one direction, and we're missing the important stuff.
Yeah, that Americans are dying, that seems like a big deal to me. Joe, thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Democrats claim to be the party of a downtrodden working class, but their priorities increasingly seem focused on displacing the working class with immigrants. We'll ask a former Democratic governor what is the party's future. It was. Today's Democrats feel differently about their constituency. The top priority in the Democratic Party today appears to be mass immigration, the displacement of existing workers here with an unending glut of foreign workers. Many of the Democratic Party argued for a shutdown of the government in pursuit of full DACA amnesty. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi even said the parents of Dreamers did, quote, a great thing by breaking our immigration laws. Martin O'Malley was the Democratic governor of Maryland. He recently started a PAC to help down-ballot Democrats. He's going to be one of the people charting the future of the Democratic Party, and he joins us tonight to tell us what it is. Governor, great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas.
So it seems to me, Merry Christmas. It seems to me that the election of Trump opens up, a bunch of questions for Democrats. Obvious one is, who are we going to be? Reclaim our place as the party of the middle class or not? I think they could probably do pretty well if they did that, but that's not obvious from the priorities. Why would the Democratic Party put amnesty for DACA recipients at the very top of the list of things to get done at the end of the year?
Look, I think the core of the Democratic Party remains that commitment to that timeless American ideal of opportunity for all. Yep. And were we not a country of immigrants, we would not be the country of creativity, innovation, diversity, which makes us such a strong country. So, look, the Democratic Party believes in the dignity of every person, in the dignity of work. And contrary to some false assertions, there is not a lot of mass immigration going on. I mean, last year, net immigration from Mexico was 0, meaning that as many people left as came in.
There has been mass immigration for 52 years, and it's completely changed the demographic mix of the country and the population of the country. We have more than 1 million coming legally. Well, right, but not at these levels. We've actually never had levels this high in American history. That's a fact.
Oh, yes,
and so, and by the way, I'm not arguing against immigration. I'm just saying
in the 1870s and the 1880s, when my grandparents came
we have a higher proportion now. But here's the point: if you're worried about wages, which are stagnant, and that seems like an obvious issue for Democrats and something to be upset about, importing 1 million low-wage workers every year does not make wages go up. It's just a math question. It doesn't work. So why would they be for that?
Yeah, here's the rub, though, Tucker. If you have people in our country already, and these DREAM Act kids, the kids covered by DACA, they were brought here at a time when they weren't even of an age of reason when they could say whether they wanted to come or didn't want to come. So the only country they've known is the United States. What's a real drag on wages is when you force people to live in the shadows of a society, to work off the books, to be exploited because they cannot go to enforce contracts, and they cannot, and they're susceptible to being taken advantage of. These are the things that hold down wages. When
okay,
workers
so you're
work
saying
in the full light of an open society, that's
giving
better for all of us.
Amnesty to people, bringing more immigrants in who are coming from countries where the average wage is a third or less than what it is here, that will somehow magically make wages in this country go up? Why hasn't that happened yet, if that works?
No, what I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is this, that these kids are already here. They have been here for years and years. The only country they know is the United States.
Right, no, I get it. It's a tough situation. Look, it's a tough situation for them, but like of all the issues, I don't know, how about entitlement cuts or the opioid crisis or things that actually affect middle-class America? Why is the one issue they're not going to move on? They'll shut the government down over it. 700,000 people here illegally. It just seems like the middle class is not their priority. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I think you ascribe to the Democratic Party, you know, a myopic worldview. I mean, these kids are important. The fact that 120 of them are falling out of status every day is also important. But the Democratic Party was fighting against this $1.3 trillion tax cut that primarily benefits the wealthy, that isn't needed, that isn't fiscally responsible, that does nothing to make wages go up. The Democratic Party is advocating in states and cities across America for raising the minimum wage, for paying a living wage. Look, we're also advocating for more affordable college, more affordable health care. So, yes, part of that is that we care about these kids whose only country is the United States of America.
No, I know. The party
it's a
cares
lot to
about the part about the kids. Governor, thank you.
Thank you. And Merry Christmas. Remember, Jesus was himself a refugee child. What would you do if he came to your border?
That's so stupid. It's hard to respond. Thank you, though. Meat is tasty, but should we give it up in order to tear down the toxic male cis hetero patriarchy, whatever that is? Our next guest says, yes, go vegetarian. And the patriarchy. She joins us after the break. Eating meat is pretty tasty, so it's no surprise that most people do it. You probably do. But are they making a mistake in leaving half the human race enslaved by patriarchy? Ann D'Alessio Parson is a sociology professor at Penn State University. She's sitting right next to me on the set right now. In a recent piece for something called the Journal of Feminist Geography, Professor D'Alessio Parson says that eating meat entrenches hegemonic masculinity, and that for women, going vegetarian, quote, pushes back against the patriarchy and may even eliminate the gender binary itself. Professor D'Alessio Parson joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Well said.
So you wrote this in the Journal of Feminist Geography. My issue did not come, so I haven't seen it. But tell me,
I can send you a copy.
I can't wait. So you say that vegetarianism helps women push back against the patriarchy and makes men more egalitarian and respectful. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, so that's not a direct quote, but that is very well summarized.
Okay.
So you must have good people working for you.
Oh, for sure. So how do you connect eating meat, carnivorous behavior, with the patriarchy?
Well, I said I brought you a gift, right?
Yes.
Use your imagination.
Okay.
And I think this book might help.
Okay.
Okay. So I read it this year. Have you ever heard of Octavia Butler?
No, never.
Oh, do you like science fiction?
Oh, tons.
Yes, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a book by Octavia Butler called Lilith's Brood. I can't remember. This camera?
Lilith's Brood. Okay. Yeah. And that's like a dystopian feminist novel about men.
It's no. You got to read it.
It's about carnivores?
You got to read it to find out,
right?
Okay.
Well, tell me, do you think that being a vegetarian helps defeat the patriarchy?
Well, wait, first, you going to read it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then
come on. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right. And this is the one I'm reading.
Okay.
And for another partial response, check out this one.
Good. So we've sold a couple feminist books here on the book club.
They're not just feminist.
But tell me, let's get to the nub of it. How I eat meat.
Yeah.
How am I perpetuating the patriarchy? by doing so?
Well, okay, there's several ways. One of the ways in which we perpetuate patriarchy is when we take up a little bit too much space.
Right.
And eating meat is a diet that requires more space on the planet.
Well,
right?
Okay.
It requires more resources to produce meat than it does to produce plant-based food.
But what does that have to do? I understand that, and I know the environmental argument against eating meat, but you seem to suggest in your piece that there's something about meat specifically that makes men dangerously masculine, and that men who refrain from meat become easier to deal with, or as you put it, more egalitarian.
I seem to say in my piece. You said you didn't read it yet.
Well, I have the summary right here.
Well, you didn't read my words.
Well, I think they've got quotation marks around it.
Oh, okay.
Do you believe that eating meat makes men more masculine?
Why are you, I guess I'm wondering why you're so concerned about, men becoming more or less masculine.
I feel like this, are you really a professor? Because I feel like this may be performance art.
What's performance? No, I'm a professor.
Okay.
I believe that when you come together, two individuals come together,
right?
You co-produce knowledge.
Okay.
So you were saying before you didn't finish college?
You co-produce knowledge.
Yes.
So you tell me this. If I stopped eating meat, how would I be better?
I don't think it's about better or worse, right?
Okay.
I think it's a question of how much space are we as individuals taking up. So how much space are we taking up when it comes to what we consume? The tea we drink, I really like tea. I had a package for you, I'll give it to you later.
Okay.
The things
Let
that
me just ask you this really
put on
quick.
our body and what we put in our households. How much space do we take up?
You promise you're a real professor?
Yeah.
Okay.
What does it mean to be a real professor?
This is getting too deep. I'm going to ask you one last final question, which is, I'm getting the sense from what I have read, whether or not you wrote it is another question, but I think that you did, that when men stop eating meat, they change in ways that you think are good. Is that true?
I think it's helpful that men stop, that all people consider how much meat they choose to put in their bodies. I'm not here to mandate anything, right? We all make our individual level choices. Our individual choice is incredibly important, right? Okay. Adam Smith.
Yes, Adam
Smith.
We
were just talking about it in the green room.
I will say I come away with two strong impressions from this interview. One, I like you more.
Really?
But I know much less.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Will you have me back to discuss
our books? It's a paradox we can talk about. Professor, thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you so much.
We can't get enough of those racist trees. We'll try to determine just how many trees need to be cut down before racism ends. Maybe it'll be all of them. We'll tell you next.
What does that mean?
Order, instead issuing a stay pending a ruling by the Supreme Court. We're going to keep you posted on any late-breaking details.
Should the North Korean regime conduct another nuclear or ballistic missile test, this resolution commits the Security Council to take even further action. It sends the unambiguous message to Pyongyang that further defiance will invite further punishment and isolation.
That was U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley earlier today after the UN Security Council unanimously voted to impose new sanctions on North Korea in response to the rogue regime's recent ICBM launch. That missile is said to be capable of hitting anywhere in the U.S. Aaron Cohen is a 21-year Israeli-trained security and counterterror veteran and the founder of Aaron Cohen's Soft Target Security Training Systems. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. You know, this is just 24 hours after the UN was down a completely different road, condemning the U.S. Today, stood together all 15 members and imposed these new sanctions, including China and Russia. How significant is that?
Well, it's really significant, and it's also ironic how the UN, as soon as their organization is threatened in any way by Pyongyang, like we're seeing here, they flip the script very quickly, but that's neither here nor there. This is very significant. The reason why is because North Korea is attempting, and in fact getting closer to being able to launch a ballistic missile, which can in fact hit our country. That's a very real thing. And so the president, along with his National Security Council, laid out a security plan that does what you have to do with terrorists. And why do I call this guy a terrorist? because a terrorist will fire at civilians unprovoked. That's what they do.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with them? You got to go for the neck. You got to bite down, and you got to make sure that they can't move and that they can't get access to their funding. And so the attack of the finances, and by restricting funding to North Korea through very hard sanctions, is exactly the security play that's required. So salute to Donald Trump, and I salute the woman who's at the UN making that announcement also. I think she's fabulous, and I think she's no nonsense. And I love hearing her put it to the UN. It's absolutely
These
my
are very
favorite thing I've been
tough
listening to in the last couple of days.
You know, not quite as far as President Trump wanted to go. He wanted to cut off all oil imports. This very dramatically limits them far below where they are right now, where they only had been reduced by about 30%. At this point now, they're almost gone. But he also wanted to have all foreign workers sent back to North Korea from everywhere else that they're working, which generates so much cash for the nation.
That's right. That's right. And by essentially what he's doing is he's creating choke points to the labor. And what that does is it essentially puts everybody on watch, which is, look, if you're going to export something to North Korea, if you're going to export goods there, if you're going to work and bring any kind of expertise back there, whether, you know, as well as the oil, we're going to constrict, even though it's only 30%, like you mentioned, still billion or millions of barrels per day. And so, again, you deal with terrorism. Again, I'm coming from the Israeli perspective here. My unit never went after the low-level terrorists. We went after the management of the guys, the financiers, the money guys. No money, no terror. No millions of barrels exported here. No labor being able to carry out North Korea business. Again, by constricting or putting choke points, you are softening that terrorist.
I don't want to run out of time. I'm glad you brought up terrorism, because that is your expertise, and I want to run out of time without asking you about this plot that was uncovered in San Francisco. It was stopped in time. You know, the assailant was posting things on the internet pro-ISIS, but also, you know, was a shooting specialist. He had a lot of training and a very specific plan. How dangerous was this?
Well, he's a former Marine. Marines are dangerous. Marines are trained to kill people for a living. That's why we go to war with them. We train alongside the Marine Corps at our counterterrorist school in Expert. At our counterterror warfare school in Israel. They're extremely lethal, and that's what they're trained to be. They're just like Defense Secretary Mattis. You know, he has a plan when he walks in a room to kill everybody, and that's how well Marines are trained. And you want them in war. They're fine instruments of counterterrorism and urban operations. But in this case, you had a radicalized, again, online, an inbred terrorist that was created here through indoctrination. I don't know exactly what it was, but extremely dangerous guy. Hats off to the FBI for getting the jump on this guy and being able to put him down and getting those warrants in time. We just want to make sure now that our soft target defensive security measures are in place. And I think going into the new year, coming out of this holiday, I wouldn't be surprised if the president is looking at putting together some type of soft target security apparatus to be able to look at this thing.
Aaron Cohen, thank you. Coming up, Rosie O'Donnell declares war on Ben Shapiro, and this one is ugly. Ben is here exclusively to respond to Rosie. That is coming up. Plus, they've made their lists, and hopefully they've checked them twice. Chris Steyerwalt, Molly Hemingway, and Wendy Acefo are here with their take on who's been naughty this year and who's been nice.
He's making a list. He's checking it twice. He's gonna find out who's naughty and nice.
Their stocking. But in place of Santa, we've got an all-star panel here with their picks. Chris Steyerwalt is Fox News politics editor. Molly Hemingway is senior editor at The Federalist and a Fox News contributor. And Wendy Acefo is a professor and political commentator. Chris Steyerwalt, I'm going to start with you. Donald Trump is at the top of your nice list? I'm so surprised about that.
Why? You think he's not nice?
No, I'm surprised you put him there along with Speaker Paul Ryan.
Well, certainly Trump has demonstrated much niceness in 2017. He has been surprising to both his critics and his supporters, and that's one of the best things that a politician can do or be, is to surprise. It's what got him into the race, and it's what made him the Republican nominee. And his capacity to surprise has also included that he has been a lot more agreeable and amiable than a lot of people thought that he would be. And Paul Ryan is a good twin for him there because, in fact, Ryan started out the Trump presidency ready to fight with Trump and drag over broken glass his agenda. And in the end, they finished the year simpatico.
Yeah,
and
with a big victory will
cut.
do that for you. Molly, you have Taylor Swift at the top of your nice list. Why is that?
Taylor Swift is the only celebrity, if not the only American, who can go 10 minutes without screaming about politics. And I think this should be commended in a year when people were unable
smart.
to do that.
She likes to make money.
She understands that this is not related to her, that talking about politics is not why people like her, and she's able to set it aside, even though many people have tried to bully her into joining the resistance vocally. So kudos to her.
Why'd you put Ronan Farrow on your list?
And
I mean, he's a great
Farrow,
reporter, but yeah.
Yes. Well, it was his tenacious and dogged reporting that led to the Harvey Weinstein scandal being put out publicly. And he put his own resources and reputation on the line and almost certainly helped women who would have been harmed by him in the future had he not done this. You know, people had rumored about it for so long, but he's the one who actually got it out there.
And he got the goods. I mean, he did the real work. There's a lot of people who deal in unnamed sources, and he was there with all the details and you know, really good old-fashioned journalism. Wendy, you have Hillary Clinton on your nice list. I don't know. When I think of Hillary Clinton, there are a lot of words that come to mind. I'm not sure necessarily nice is right up at the top, but how come it is for you?
I have Hillary Clinton up there because I just think that overall she's just been a champion for a majority of women. But another person who I had on there that I was surprised I actually put on there, I reached across the aisle and I put Marco Rubio on my nice list. As a Democrat, you wouldn't expect me to say that, but I think there's something to be said for him when he said, you know what, we need to increase the tax credit for low-income and moderate-income families. And I thought that was really important, and I tip my hat to him, even though he is across the aisle. That was a good job by Marco Rubio.
Now, we all can't wait to get to naughty, so let's just go for that right there. Chris Darrell, is this a misprint, or is President Trump also at the top of your naughty list, and what is up with that?
Also naughty. Trump has, there are a few kinds of Trump, and of the problems that the administration has had this year, you know, they had a good close, but a very rocky opening. And a lot of that came just from Trump acting out, just from
Trumping?
Yeah, when he was being obdurate or when he was being mean-spirited, when he was being unpleasant or unkind for the sake of itself. And oftentimes that's where Trump finds himself, is losing ground, failing to gain where he could because he's doing unnecessarily naughty things.
Okay, I saw Steve Bannon on there too. I don't think I need to ask you why he's on the list. Molly, let's go right to you. You on your naughty list, environmentalists who hate children. That was explain that to our audience in case they don't know about that.
In July, there was this report that if you wanted to take care of climate change, you need to have fewer kids. And they and feminists joined together and said everyone should have fewer kids, which led people to jokingly. Yeah, well, and they were posting pictures of their family asking which one of their kids they should let go to help with climate change. But just in general, if you're opposed to kids, you're definitely naughty. That's the nicest thing I can say about it. It's really bad to
You put
not
Brian
love
Ross on your naughty list. I think I know why that is the case.
Brian Ross and the rest of the political media, who had so many bad stories, all pushing a false narrative about Russia collusion, all of their errors went in the same direction. It was a really bad year, particularly because they wanted to spend the year holding Trump accountable, and instead they had all these problems.
Wendy, you have the NFL at the top of your naughty list.
I sure did. I feel like the NFL really mismanaged everything to do with the Kaepernick protest. Quite frankly, it was about social justice. They fumbled the ball. They should have done more. And then on top of that, I also feel like they blackballed Colin Kaepernick. You know, he was not able to try out for any team. If they would have brought him onto a team, I believe a lot of this would have been dulled down. And then on top of that, you know, the NFL continues to have issues with their players, not just when it comes to social justice, but also domestic violence, and they're not doing their job. So, you know what? Their ratings are down, and they're down for a reason. So,
Chris, real quick, do you think that President Trump would take more pleasure in being on the nice or the naughty list? Real quick, just a couple seconds.
Well, his answer to that question will determine whether or not the Republicans are going to have a okay 2018 and whether or not he gets elected in 2020. It's all about choices.
I don't know. I mean, the naughty list, that could be a Twitter war breaking out between two prominent voices on the left and the right. It all started with Rosie O'Donnell's suggestion that she would bribe lawmakers to vote against the tax bill. Ben Shapiro wasn't having it, saying that's a violation of federal law.